So welcome everybody to the last class, and we're so happy to have everyone here. And Colin, if you want to go to the next slide. And we have just a few announcements for the students in the class. So a reminder that you have a seminar this week, or for those that were missing their seminar from last Friday, there's a seminar on Monday the 12th. Anyway, so there's a last seminar, and it will be a good opportunity to think back on the class. And if you have questions on your final assignment, it's a good place to go as well, and to talk in general about the class and about this particular panel tonight. And then there's no short weekly assignment this week. So those are all completed, and your final assignment for the class is due on April 23rd. And you can always email your TA if you have questions, or you can reach us at univ2020@uoguelph.ca. We'll go to the next slide, and I'll let Ryan talk about this one.
Yep, so you know the drill by now. And if you don't, I guess it's not that relevant because this is the last class. So what we're going to do is what we usually do, and maybe I'll just say it for those who haven't been here. The Zoom chat is open for posing questions to the panelists, and we'll try to keep it focused on the topic of discussion tonight. If you have other things you'd like to discuss or points that come up that you want to continue talking about, you can make use of the discussion forum on CourseLink for the course. There's also, I believe, some other chat platforms that have been set up for members of the course. And as always, we try to incorporate as many questions as we can. We often merge them, or try to collate them into themes. Or Sophie and I just talk, ask what we're interested in. So it can go either way. But same basic format tonight as we have been doing, although the makeup of the panel and the topic are definitely unique this week. So maybe we'll go on. Yep.
So we're so thrilled to have all our guests tonight and to have this panel, which gives us a chance to reflect back on the year in terms of teaching and learning, and look forward to what things and conversations we want to keep having, and what's worked well and what hasn't worked well, and where there's room for improvement, and what we've learned and what we still have to learn. And I'll start by introducing our first guest. So as usual, everybody will present first, and then we'll have the general discussion. So I'll start with Barry Prasma-Townsend, who is the manager of student accessibility services at the University of Guelph. Barry has a Bachelor's of Arts from Guelph and a Master of Social Work from the University of Toronto. He has published on the topic of intersecting identities and academic success, and he is a member of the executive of the Inter-University Disability Issues Association. When he isn't working, Barry likes to spend time with his dog, a German short-haired pointer named Murphy. So maybe we'll see Murphy tonight. And thank you so much for coming, Barry. We're so thrilled to have you here.
My pleasure. So thank you so much for the opportunity. The way I sort of have envisioned what I was going to talk about, to serve as by way of introduction, was to give a fairly broad overview of accessibility. And when it comes to SAS, like my regular daytime job, we think mostly about academic accessibility. So when it comes to parking or athletics or websites, those aren't really my areas of specialty. It's mainly I'm focused on courses and degree requirements. And my department, my unit, Student Accessibility Services, we're part of a larger department called Student Wellness. So you'll see that red circle, which is our logo, a couple times as we go through this. As I said, this is my dog Murphy, who is, I think she's given up on bugging me for dinner, and my partner will feed her shortly. But if you hear tap dancing in the background, that's how she likes to get my attention. So as some general context, the work that SAS does, particularly when it comes to accessibility, we're informed by the Ontario Human Rights Code. I'm sure most people in this call know that the code is legislation in Ontario that says people have a right to be free from discrimination, and it identifies a number of protected statuses, right? So sexual orientation, gender and gender expression, religion, racialized identities. So one of those protected statuses is disability. And I always use that word with a little bit of caution, because that is not necessarily a term that everybody loves. And part of the reason is because it tends to draw people's attention to our limitations and what we can't do, rather than focusing on our strengths and what we can do. But the word disability is what's in the code, so that's typically what I will be focusing on. And then student accessibility services, we're really, like, that is our bread and butter, is thinking about disability. But we do consider intersecting identities. You know, as one example, you know, we had a student a couple of years ago who observes Passover as a Jewish student, and her disability-related accommodations interfered with her observance of Passover, and you couldn't accommodate one without accommodating the other. So sometimes you have to think about people as whole human beings, and you know, with lots of different things going on for them. As I'm going through this, you're going to hear me talk a little bit about accessible design versus accommodation. So basically what the Human Rights Code says is, in an ideal world, you're going to create an accessible, inclusive environment first. And then if you can't be inclusive by the way you've designed things, you will accommodate. So anytime that you create an accommodation, that is when you modify a policy, a procedure, or a requirement in order to facilitate access, right? So accessible design is you have a class either online or in a classroom that has an elevator or is at ground level without any stairs, where, you know, people with all different abilities can access the room. But, you know, if the purpose of your meeting is to look at a skylight in an old building that only has stairs, you know, you might not be able to move that meeting because you're looking at the skylight. And so you may have to accommodate by, you know, inviting that person who can't make it up the stairs by using their phone to participate. So that would be the accommodation. Or, you know, you can't offer to catch them up later, or you do something else to try and involve them a different way. And then University of Guelph has a formal policy on academic accommodation. I won't spend a lot of time on governance issues, although I can see there's some people here who are good on academic governance. So we do have policy that has gone through Senate at the University of Guelph that sort of outlines who's responsible for what when it comes to accommodations. And then my last sort of general overview, broad slide, I have some more sort of specific examples reflecting on the year, but just to give you that context, abilities is a really diverse group of people, right? So oftentimes we hear people in the broader community group together people with disabilities as this as this homogeneous group. And we talk, you know, we assume that, you know, if you accommodate for one student, you're accommodating for everybody who needs accommodations, but actually it's quite diverse. So, you know, this is examples of the types of students that we support. So students with autism spectrum disorder during the pandemic. You know, if autism spectrum disorder, one of the ways that it affects people is your ability to read social cues. And so doing everything in a virtual environment has really affected the way that some people are able to read those social cues or get help with managing social cues. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the pandemic is really, so we in the past would have said to people with ADHD, you know, not sure if distance education courses are the right courses for you, especially maybe not in the early part of your degree, that, you know, get a good handle on how university works and then consider DE later on. And the reason is because often with ADHD, you need some structure to help you. You know, you need the structure of going to class on a regular basis, and learning remotely tends to be a little less structured and present some different challenges. Students with concussions and ABIs, so we know that a lot of screen time can trigger symptoms for if you've got concussion or post-concussion syndrome. You know, you might be told by your doctor not to look at a screen at all, which is hard if that's your primary way of learning. Students with hearing impairments, there was like this whole hoopla that happened in the fall around making sure that we were providing good captioning for courses, and that was it. So this course is in Zoom. So back in September, Zoom did not have a good captioning option, and so there were like a whole lot of extra steps that had to be done. It's a lot better now. So helping faculty think about that, but then we also, you know, we have students who use sign language, and that, you know, sign language in an online setting, it's possible, but there's some additional challenges sometimes with that. Learning disabilities, you know, often affect your ability to perceive written information. So if you've suddenly shifted all of your instructions on how to do things particularly for like asynchronous courses, if like all of your instructions and the structure of your course is done in written form and nobody's really explaining or talking it through, there can be some additional barriers to perceiving what you're required to do in the course. Medical conditions, actually for medical conditions, such a broad group, like that's a whole other broad group just in and of itself. But, you know, sometimes remote learning has been good because, you know, if you've got chronic pain and you use all of the energy and time that you have to be sort of functional, just getting yourself to campus, by the time you get to campus, you might be completely worn out. So remote learning then provides you this opportunity of, you sign in and you're able to learn right from the very beginning. Or I think of like people with chronic, irritable bowel syndrome or Crohn's disease, where you might be tied to a washroom. It's easier sometimes to do that from home. Mental health conditions have the full broad spectrum when it comes to the pandemic. So some people, it has been better because they're at home and closer connected to a support network that's been really great. But I think we've all heard in the news, all the stories about how, the social isolation really affects people in a negative way, sometimes with mental health conditions. And so it has really intensified mental health difficulties for some people. And you have to remember, I'm sure some of you have experienced this, but oftentimes University of Guelph students come to university because they're done with their family, living at home with their family. They just need some distance, right? And sometimes that is part of what helps them to have better mental health, is to have the distance. And now you're forced to live with that family of origin, and that can be a challenge. Mobility and dexterity, a range of things. So, certainly with the pandemic, maybe not contending so much with snow and ice clearing on campus, which can be a challenge on a very pedestrian-oriented campus. But if you have difficulties with typing, you may be even more reliant than ever on software, the assistive software that may assist you with that. And vision, again, assistive software would oftentimes be where we go, but making sure that content is accessible. So screen readers technology that helps people to read and perceive stuff visually. The content needs to be formatted in a way that is readable. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. We have some awesome people in the library who help facilitate, convert stuff to accessible text, especially academic content. And then just some themes, good and bad, barriers. There's been lots of barriers to remote learning. Some of them some things are good, some things are not, but we have encountered lots of barriers. There's been lots of improved flexibility, and my understanding of this course is it's one that has provided lots of flexibility in the way that people learn and participate. And one of the things we've learned for sure is that structure is crucial, giving people a little bit of some guidance on how to follow along in a course. So more concrete things that we've discovered, these are things so part of my job is to help faculty understand how to support students or how to create accessible learning. So these are some of the messages that we've been saying to faculty this semester. So course outlines, so important. Historically at the University of Guelph, once a course outline was established at the beginning of the semester, it was locked in and you can't change it. Well, you can, but it's not easy. It's deliberately difficult to change course outlines. And the pandemic has sort of forced us to where we have to have a little bit more flexibility. But then that opens the door to, now we don't have concrete information about sometimes the date of when our midterm is going to happen. And it's really important if you've got, if you have to regularly go for medical procedures, you need to know when your midterms are so that you can plan around, your medical procedures to be available for the exam and to study and be ready. There were lots of issues in September in the fall semester about inconsistent places to find information. Every course seemed to have a different way where the instructor was providing guidance on what's expected in the course. It's been, I don't know if it's been better this semester or if people have just sort of got the hang of figuring that out, but certainly we haven't heard the same level of chaos as we were hearing in the fall. And then it's really important to know that when, I hardly ever use this word, but the word pivot has been used so much when it comes to the pandemic, right? That things changed and then all of a sudden we had to change everything about how we do things. When you make an unexpected sudden change, especially to the delivery of academic content, it has a disproportionate effect on students with disabilities. People with disabilities oftentimes have to plan in advance. How am I going to access this content? They need to know what their accommodations are. There's often other people like SES involved in supporting those accommodations, and all of that takes time to set up. So when everything suddenly changes, it's really hard to keep up and for students to figure out what's going on. We heard lots around workload. So there was some really good, so there's good research that says that small regular assessments help students to learn more effectively. And that word got circulated really widely. And sometimes the consequence was that students became overwhelmed. And so I know I hope I'm not naming any names here, but there certainly was a course, I won't say which department, that had 27 assessments in the course. So maybe gone so far to the opposite end of the spectrum where, that's really becomes overwhelming for students. Helping faculty to gauge how much time does it take, as they're structuring their courses, the expectations they set out for students, how do you gauge how much time it takes to complete those things? And that's been really, some people have just a natural ability to understand that, and other people struggle with that. We recommend, one of the things we've learned is to recommend to faculty members, have some weeks where there's nothing due, to help students to sort of spread things out a bit. We're giving faculty advice about, we can't tell faculty what they have to do, but we try to suggest that when it comes to scheduling deadlines, this has been going on for a long time, but the pandemic made it so much more front and center that things were being made due on, at midnight or on Sundays or holidays or during reading week. So university actually has policy, like stuff is not supposed to be due, no compulsory academic activities during reading week. But we've been actually saying students are a lot like everybody else in the world. They tend to work towards deadlines. That's not unique to students. Everybody works to deadlines. But it means if you have a deadline that's at midnight, students are going to work till midnight. If you have a deadline that it's at 4 o'clock at the beginning of your class, people will work to get the assignment done for 4 o'clock. And so our recommendation is, if it's a scheduled class, make the deadline at the beginning of the class. And from an accessibility perspective, this is really important for, particularly an example would be somebody with a medical condition or a mental health condition, where sometimes you need a lot of regimented, like you have to go to bed at the same time, you have to take medication at the same time, you have to get up at the same time every day. And so working to midnight just actually isn't a feasible option for you. If you don't have scheduled classes, like an asynchronous class, we recommend to faculty at least make sure your deadline is in the middle during the academic day. Like the academic day doesn't go till 12 p.m. So pick a time that's sort of during the daytime. And then workload issues have affected both students and faculty. And I think I can see the faculty members nodding as I'm saying this, but certainly, I think faculty often try to put on, to be professional and to present themselves with, here's what I think students need at the front of the classroom. But, many faculty have family responsibilities, as do students, and trying to figure out how to balance a research project that now everything's in chaos and teach. And, there's so many things. So workload has been just, I think, a challenge for everyone all the way around. Online exams, we've learned so much about online exams this year. So, some of the left-hand side here is themes that we've heard a lot from faculty. Academic integrity is a constant theme. There's been lots of discussion about Respondus and people having concerns about privacy and racism and Respondus. And I'm sure people will ask questions about that later. Offering alternate formats. And I know this course and some of the other ones that this group of profs have offered, they've looked at, maybe we don't have to do, we've always done traditional exams, but maybe we can do a take-home assignment instead, a take-home exam instead, or other ways of assessing things. And that's led to some really, really positive things, some really cool things that profs are doing to think about how do we assess learning outcomes differently. We've had some concerns about alternate platforms. So there are some, CourseLink, I'm sure everyone knows, CourseLink is the default platform for learning content, academic content. But there are some other ones out there, Mobius, Top Hat, some things that, but they're not centrally supported. And one of the things I always worry about with those platforms is who has looked seriously to see, are they accessible? Can a screen reader, can somebody use a screen reader? Can somebody who maybe doesn't have great dexterity and needs a little bit more time, are they able to access that platform? If you need, there's a software program called Kurzweil that is text-to-speech software. It's pretty widely available. It's probably the most commonly used software our students use. And it doesn't play nicely with some of the other platforms out there. And then we've done a whole bunch of work this past year to automate the process of setting up accommodations for online tests and exams, particularly for CourseLink. So there's a whole process that has helped to, because I think I calculated at one point, it was 75 hours that we saved in the first 6 weeks of the semester just by automating that process. And then accommodations that are weird or difficult with online exams. So breaks, how do you take a break during an online exam? It's something that's necessary for some students. Trying to encourage faculty to think about making sure when they choose settings for their exam, it's really important that students have the opportunity to go back. And we think every student, this is one of those accessible design things, every student should be able to go back and check their work or skip a question that they're stuck on and move on and then come back. But because of some of the academic integrity concerns, one of the settings is only allow people to go forward, and that has been a bit of an issue. Sometimes students, if you've got an online exam and it's a multiple choice exam, there's nowhere really for students to ask questions, especially if you're working remotely. You can't put up your hand and a prof will come over and answer your question. So we've been trying to say to faculty, it's a great idea to have like a text box, maybe even a couple of places during the exam where students can type if they've got a question or they didn't understand the question. So they made some assumptions and this is how they want to explain how they answered a question. have some text boxes where people can do that. Scrap paper, like every student should have scrap paper. Like I think, so one of the things that SAS does, we do the accommodations, but we also coach people on strategies. And so one is like almost all the strategies that we coach people on to manage how they are affected in an exam setting involve scrap paper. It's just so common. So, but there are some profs who say like no scrap paper because of academic integrity concerns. So we've had to then have a whole conversation about why is scrap paper important and how do we get around some of those concerns. And then there's actually, I saw an article published out of University of PEI last week. I think it was UPEI, that was talking about sort of strategies for ensuring academic integrity in online exams. And the prof identified a whole bunch of things. And one of them was make the time really limited. Students have to know the material really well and answer efficiently in the time that they're given. And I would argue the opposite. I would say that if you have a time pressure, what you are measuring is how well does that person cope with stress, not how well do they understand pandemics, right? How well have they acquired the knowledge? So we've had lots of discussion about time pressure and should it be a thing or not. Universal design. So this is a principle that gives everybody the extra time. So one of the really common accommodations that SAS students have is they get extra time on tests and exams. So you can think of this as the student is low vision or blind and they're using software to help them read the questions on the screen. That software speaks often at a specific speed, and it just takes longer to let the software do its thing, to hear, to process, to answer the questions. So extra time, I mean, that's one example, but it's a really common accommodation. And there's lots of work. It's tricky to do individualized accommodations for each student. So in some settings and some courses, the solution is let's just give everybody double time. And I keep saying it's a great idea in principle, but there's some things that you need to make sure are in place to actually do that well. So one of them is you have to have evidence that 90 to 95% of students have completed the exam in the original amount of time. So my spouse was an English student and when he did his undergrad, and he was top of his class. And he said, you know, if you gave me double time on my exam, I would use double time to get to polish up my exam, my essays, because he wrote all essay exams. So we have sort of said, well, maybe essay exam's not such a good idea. There was a court case in the States where universal design was challenged, and it was successfully challenged. So there's a court ruling in the States saying universal design is not a viable thing. That hasn't played out in Canada. There are actually different legal standards and some of that stuff in Canada. So we think it is viable, but only in specific circumstances. So there has to be a specific endpoint, really, when students are finished answering the exam. We have ongoing discussion. So there's some policy that's been working its way through the governance process around setting a maximum value of an assessment. That I think that's continued to be an issue during the pandemic. The university has a policy that says students have to get a substantial amount of feedback by the 40th class day, but nowhere do we have policy that defines what substantial means. So there's a policy proposal to try and pin that down a little bit more. Historically, faculty members have asked for medical notes. If a student is sick and misses a midterm, often profs will ask for medical note. So during the pandemic, there's been a push to stop asking for medical notes. Like, we do not want people coming to health services because they're sick, because they're either going to pick something up or most likely they're not going to pick it up, but they may be sharing it with staff or exposing people unnecessarily. And we really want to keep the health clinic to people who actually are sick and need to be here. So asking, taking people on good faith if they say that they're sick, unless there's a reason to not. That's kind of the principle, is take people on good faith unless there's a good reason. So if somebody is sick every other week, okay, maybe you need to register with SAS or get a note, or we need to be thinking about something else. But if it's a one-off, treat it like a one-off. Said to lots of faculty, make sure that you affirm for students. We affirm for each other, for ourselves, for staff and faculty, but also for students. It is hard to live in a COVID world. Like, it kind of sucks, right? Like, it's kind of terrible a lot of the time. And then, accessing campus resources. So I don't know how many people in this class are first year students, but, how do you learn what resources are available if you're not actually sitting beside someone in class who says, hey, I went to this really cool workshop last week about how to write better. So how do you navigate when you're not physically in the environment? Learning the resources has been a bit trickier. Flexibility, we try to, one of our principles is we try to encourage people to think about building, when you set a deadline, have some flexibility. If somebody is in a car accident, build your mark. We do encounter some courses where like the marking scheme is like the whole course is so structured that there's really no flexibility. You have to be done on this date because things have to be marked and returned to students the next day because students are doing something that builds on the next thing. And we try to say, if you can, try to build in like 2 or 3 days of flexibility so that and don't give it universally, because if you give it universally, you may as well not, it's not really an extension on a deadline because people will work to the deadline. So have your deadline, but then give people, that extra time if they need it, if there's and take people again on good faith if they say they need the extra time. Provide makeup opportunities. So if somebody is sick, we try to encourage faculty to think about offering a makeup opportunity. The SAS perspective is at least 7 days after the original date. And then we always think, from an accessibility perspective, offer choices. Whether that is, there's 7 quizzes in this course and we're only going to count 5, or you can complete this assignment and there's like 3 different formats you can choose to complete this assignment, or there's 5 questions on this exam, but I'm going to give you can choose to answer 3 of them on the exam. So choices is often a really important principle for accessibility. I'm not going to linger on this, but this brings me almost to the end. I toyed with, do I bother including it or not? And I thought, well, you might find it interesting to know that we would often argue in SAS that good teaching improves accessibility. So these are all questions that we say to faculty members, like, as you're thinking about how you teach, these are questions that you might consider. So why is the information that you're presenting relevant today? What's weird or amazing or unexpected or surprising or compelling about that information? How do you know the information is true or valid or reliable? So some further things down the list. How might this information be misused? Are there other different worldviews or different ways of knowing? So these are all like good academic questions that really you should be, any course should be covering. But if you do these things, it actually helps people to learn. So we know how brains cognitively process information, and taking this approach of like what's novel, what's weird, what's unusual, builds in accessibility in the way that you teach. So often accessibility is about styles of communication. So I think this is my last slide. For the future, some things that are sort of on the horizon. So the provost has a task force on pedagogical innovation, which is a really mouthful way of saying there's a whole group of people, mostly faculty, but certainly a good number of students as well, and a couple of staff like myself who've been meeting throughout the winter semester, and looking at what have we learned from COVID, and then how do we continue some of the great things that have happened. So some of the really cool, really promising things, how do we let more faculty know about them? How do we build buy-in to these things? How do we maybe learn from some of the things that didn't go so well? We were like, I'm just as happy to see that be done with and never see it again. Because it's relevant to my area, demand for the exam center, really worrisome. So the SAS Exam Center has 70 seats, 70. Pre-pandemic, we had 22,000 bookings for the exam center. So we got a little space and a lot of people who want to use our space. And so what's tricky about the fall is you don't know what's going to happen. Do we need to, like, we pack people in like little desks that are like, they're like 2.5 feet wide. We might not be able to seat people that way. So if we go from 70 seats down to 35 seats, where is everyone else going to sit when they need to write their exams? Return to campus. So we're hoping that there will be flexible participation. There'll be lots of hybrid courses is kind of our hope. One of the things we've heard from people is there are lots of students who historically would not have been able to come to campus, or had difficulty coming to campus. So if you had a compromised immune system, I talked earlier about a person with chronic pain. Historically, those students would have been told, I'm sorry, you registered for an on-campus course. This course is offered this way. If you can't come to campus, long-term to complete your degree, we need to be thinking about taking DE courses, or we need to think about, should you be taking courses from Athabasca University, which is a university that specializes in DE courses, or, but we're thinking about going to the courses that are formatted this way. And I think what we've heard really clearly from people with disabilities is that argument is not going to hold up anymore, right? Like, we have learned, yes, courses can be delivered remotely, even if they're on campus. And so we're trying to, SAS, we're currently trying to figure out, like, how do we have conversations with the faculty about that? Because some faculty will embrace that, like, will be whole hog, totally on board. They want to do it flexibly. They want to be, take that approach. And there will be some, because faculty are a very diverse group, just like students, and some will be resistant to doing that because they're not technologically savvy, or they don't have the technology easily available, or sometimes there are religious, concerns or other things. So how do we have conversations with faculty about flexible participation? And then my thing is, and if you have a chance to like poke senior admin, don't tell them I told you to do this. But I am really hoping that when course selection comes around, that students will know when they're choosing courses that are scheduled to be on campus, whether there will be a hybrid component to that course. I don't actually know if that's going to happen. I don't know if that's technically possible, but if you had a chance to bug people, that's a really good question to be asking. And then there is a Teaching and Learning Innovations Conference that's sort of targeted to faculty. I'm going to be doing a presentation, sort of a half day. Some of it's sort of asynchronous beforehand, and some of it's a half day. Again, about what I'm talking about right now, but in 2.5 hours, and a series of videos that people can watch and that kind of thing. So trying to help faculty know about some of the things that we've learned from this experience. So I've taken up way more than my 10 minutes, and I will stop there, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Barry. And if you had been in the class this semester, you would know we're not fussy at all about time. So this was perfect and so informative. And I agree with Samantha that this shows the whole reason why we love SAS at Guelph. Our second speaker tonight is Caitlin Beacock, and she is an undergraduate student in psychology who is graduating this semester. That's awesome. She's currently wrapping up her honors thesis, which examines the type of support students with mental illness want from their parents while they're adjusting to university. Caitlin was born with a physical disability called acampomelic dysplasia, I think.
Very good, very good.
And is dedicated to improving the campus experience for everyone. Caitlin plans to attend grad school in either forensic psychology or child psychology, and is currently puppy training a Shih Tzu poodle called Ellie, who we might hear tonight. We hope so, because we're dog friendly. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining us tonight, Caitlin.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for asking me to be here. I didn't prepare a PowerPoint because I felt like the way I was presenting my information was more of a conversation, so I just wanted to keep it light and easy. So to begin, I want to start way back when the whole pandemic started, because obviously that happened toward the end of second semester last year. So at the start of COVID, I ended up moving home with my parents and my 10-year-old brother, just for my own safety as a high-risk individual, and to reduce the number of personal support workers coming in and out of my house, because I have my parents that are able to help me. I want to preface this by saying that is an extreme luxury that not everybody has, and especially those with disabilities, many rely on other people coming in and out of their home for their daily living. But for me, in this experience, I had to learn how to do school and continue my university routine at home for the first time since grade 12 again. So it was kind of a big adjustment. And also I've noticed as the progression of the pandemic has occurred, it's been more challenging to find a work-home balance. I think course loads seem heavier, and the downtime you take, you almost kind of feel guilty for taking it, because you know you have something to do and you could be doing it, but you also know that you need to take breaks, which is difficult. And to go off of those 2 points, as your professor explained, I have a very complicated physical disability, and with that comes an extensive personal care routine, which carves out a lot of time in my schedule. And it may, to the outsider, seem like a form of self-care because I have to do it every day, and that's a big chunk of my time taken out. However, for people with disabilities, our routines are something we have to do whether or not we want to do it. Quite frankly, I don't want to do mine, but I have to. So trying to fit that in an already busy course load can be an added challenge. Similar to above, I think a lot of the additional work, similar to what Barry was saying, is that there's a lot of mini assignments. Although they're productive, some are like reflections, like you'll learn a chunk, you'll do an assignment which makes total sense, and then reflect on that. Well, your reflection is also incorporated in the assignment that you just did. So it kind of is repetitive in that sense, and it's hard to come up with new ideas of how you've reflected on the same thing. And to help with these challenges and the fact that online schooling involves a lot of screen time, I definitely made a conscious effort to do things that don't involve the screen when I try to make and use my downtime effectively. For example, I love puzzles. I love play with clay. It's something we have here in Cambridge, but also I think in Guelph, where you can just grab and order a piece, they deliver it to your door with all your supplies. You paint it however you want, return it, get it fired, and it's really easy. Or I just got a new Cricut, so I can't wait to be done so I can try Cricketing. And kind of to step sideways from that, sideways from the direct school experience, but still pertains to student life because our lives should involve more than just school, so to speak. I've noticed that as a person with a disability, prior to this lockdown that happened as of Friday, there was some semblance of normalcy kind of starting, and it was hard as an individual who is high risk and who still isn't comfortable to go back into the community and start to kind of reintegrate into our normal routines. It's difficult to see that kind of sense of normalcy because, and I love that people are getting to do that, but for myself it was difficult because you want to be able to go study with your friends, change your environment, go to the library, go even get Starbucks on campus, things that seem normal and totally everyday in past years, but this year, not necessarily an option. As well in the winter months, because we live in Canada, I found that my motivation really went down toward the beginning of the second semester and right until reading week, and we've been very fortunate to get warmer weather after reading week, much earlier than usual, which kind of helps break that away. I've visited the Arboretum for the first time in my university career at Guelph. Beautiful place, definitely going to do that again. But I think those opportunities to really to separate yourself kind of reiterate the importance of finding a work-home balance. And lastly, the last kind of point I want to touch on before moving to a few positives, because I am someone that does try to look at the positives of the situation and some conversation, some directions for future conversation. I'm in my 5th year, so as the professor said, I'm about to graduate, and I was started this semester, so excited. I was looking at grad schools and grad school opportunities, and then with COVID and safety concerns and my disability, I found that a lot of the volunteer aspects and the volunteer experience that I needed in order to boost that side of my transcript were pretty non-existent. For example, I'm thinking about the McMaster Child Life Program, which requires 100 hours in a hospital setting, being advised by a child life specialist. And there is no opportunities from here to anywhere in the GTA that's offering that kind of direct, focused volunteer. Therefore, I had to make the best decision for myself, which was to come back to Guelph, which I'm totally fine with, and kind of continue to improve my academic transcript. One positive that I want to mention is that although our learning has all been online, I felt that there's an ample opportunity to connect with people online through these platforms. I've noticed myself pushing myself out of my comfort zone and reaching out to peers because you can't just go up to them in the classroom. You literally have to send them a message on a chat and hope they see it. And I've definitely connected with a lot more people and incorporated more group chats to kind of support each other, but also build friendship, which has been super helpful as well from the experiences I've had and with the professors I've had this year. They're super open and understanding, and they are human just as much as we are, and understand that we're all doing the best we can. And for example, my honors thesis prof for the class portion, he would do kind of bi-weekly check-in to say, okay, everybody, vent. How is this going? Say what you love, say what you hate, I don't really care. You get off your chest so that you can all kind of support each other and get through this next chunk of, say, data collection or building your results, whatever it is. We kind of all got through it together. And I think with online learning, the benefit is you're not one of 300 sitting in a classroom that your professor might not know. They might know your face, but they definitely don't know your name. but you have to definitely make that effort to connect with them, and being able to connect with them puts a face to the name, and you build a rapport, and that has been super beneficial this semester and last semester. I've definitely done it more this semester, but last semester it's definitely a good learning curve. And then lastly, as a wrap up, I know a lot of these are experiences that the general population has had, so I just wanted to add a little bit of my experience as a person with a disability, but a future direction or conversation similar to Barry. I'm super interested to see how we reintegrate back to face-to-face learning, and if the accommodations we have today will stay in place while supporting our return to the classroom. For example, as Barry said, I was one of the students that in the winter semester may not have come to campus because snow clearance, whatever it may be. So having that opportunity to still doing like this, participate, attend, be an active member in the classroom, whether or not I'm physically present, is definitely going to be an added bonus for many students. As well, more broadly, I think these changes within universities, more in the workforce and things like this, as for someone like myself, transitioning out of schooling, although I'm returning, but if I was to move on, I have these same accommodations being put in place to be successful in my workplace as well. So those are kind of my experiences, and I, again, want to thank you for having me. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Caitlin, and so much of what you said like totally resonated. And I think, yeah, the point about it makes we don't know what's going to happen moving forward, but it's difficult to imagine that we're going back to exactly how we were doing it before. You talked about being out of our comfort zone. If I had thought 2 years ago I would be in front of a camera and recorded, that is like so anxiety inducing to me. And that but I hate listening to my voice. I've actually familiarized myself this year. So many ways in which we've been put outside of our comfort zone. So yeah, it's really interesting. We'll go for our third speaker tonight. Mitchell Marto is an undergrad student in political science who is currently enrolled in this class this semester. Mitch has a disability related to a connective tissue genetic disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that in his case causes severe leg pain. The volatile nature of his health situation has delayed his studies at times, including in March 2020, when he had to temporarily drop out of school because of the lockdown and loss of access to pain treatments. Recently, Mitch completed a documentary about his struggles with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and the documentary is called Bend or Break, and it will be publicly released next year. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Mitch.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm not very practiced at keeping track of time while I'm speaking, so if you could give me like a minute warning to wrap it up, then that'd be great, so thanks for that. And a quick trigger warning that suicide will be mentioned, so I just want to mention that quick trigger warning. And of course, obligatory shout out to the Wednesday and Thursday morning seminar groups, because I would attend either one depending on what my illness allowed, and so, hey guys. But to give context to my experiences in this pandemic, I need to mention that I'm unfortunately no stranger to how bad pandemics can be, because the majority of my problems started in 2009 during that H1N1 influenza swine flu pandemic, because that's actually when my pain started, because I caught it, which is a bit ironic considering that my friends were making fun of me for carrying Purell everywhere I went in grade 8 at middle school, because I would always catch whatever was going around. And I guess jokes on them, or joke on me in this case. But so I was quite ill, and I got the normal flu pains that everyone will get when they have the flu. But for me, the problem is they just never ever went away, and it's been constant leg pain since then. And so this led to kind of course, some mood difficulties, because it took quite some time for me to accept that this wasn't going away. I'd gotten sick many times in my life, and up until that point, I was perceived as quite a happy-go-lucky, healthy child. I'd play sports and things like that. And then suddenly I couldn't do any of that, and I started to realize this was permanent. And so that's when some mood problems came about. But those mood problems became a problem in and of itself because my pain was unexplainable at the time. Why did these flu pains continue when I didn't have the flu anymore? No one could really answer that. And so when my doctors began to think after all my medical tests were negative, and they convinced my family of the same, is that my pain was psychosomatic. That means that they're not saying I was faking it. No one ever accused me of faking it, but they were saying that it was caused by a mental illness rather than any physical problem. And that was terrible because I knew that they were saying like depression can cause pain, which is true. But I knew that my pain started, and if I was depressed, then that came 6 months later when I realized it wasn't going away. I know it came first. And so them insisting on this was really hard to hear because they were prescribing antidepressants, not painkillers. So they were kind of barking up the wrong tree and saying I was depressed. And I didn't even really know if I was depressed. I was miserable, true. But let's say you're on fire, and one of the symptoms of depression is you can't enjoy the things you used to enjoy. And so if you're on fire, you can't enjoy the things that you used to enjoy either, unfortunately. So if you're trying to watch your favorite TV show while you're on fire, you're not going to enjoy it. Does that mean you're depressed? I don't think so. But so since it was just constant years and years of them insisting on the depression aspect and couldn't tell me what was physically wrong with me, I became hopeless because when is my pain going to be treated if they weren't even saying I had something physically wrong with me? And so I became suicidal, and I did attempt suicide, and I was on a morphine prescription at the time. And morphine can be very deadly when you overdose on it. So I almost didn't make it through that. And so this thankfully improved a lot, the situation. As you can see, I'm not too shabby in terms of my energy and things right now. But it took 4 years, or 5 years actually, to get a real diagnosis. And the diagnosis was mentioned by our professor just a moment ago, and that is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, a genetic connective tissue disorder. One of the things I can show and how they clinically diagnosed me, I don't know if I can angle it here, but if your thumb can touch your arm, that shows joint hypermobility. Or if you have really stretchy skin, then that's hyperelasticity of your skin. And so when my joints kept cracking at a doctor's appointment, a neurologist appointment, where they did a nerve conduction study that was negative, and I was heartbroken again because I thought, oh, maybe I have a nerve problem, that'll explain everything and we can treat it. But it was negative. And then I got up to leave, and all my joints cracked at the same time, and the doctor noticed that and asked me all these questions about hypermobility. And then we started to uncover the real answer. And then I had a skin biopsy ordered, and it showed how deformed my skin cells are. And that was a definitive diagnosis. And that's when my life got so much better, because no one was treating me like I was just crazy. I had a physical problem, an incurable problem, but I could reach out to other people who have the same illness, and I could go to support groups. And it was great. And I was able to be an advocate for everyone with this condition, and even did something pretty cool where my mom is a member of provincial parliament. And so we had the idea to write a speech about this illness, and then my mom would read it out at the Queen's Park legislature in front of all the politicians. And just months later, after we did that, we brought a group of like 20 people with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome together in a group. And 2 months after that visit, the Ontario government announced the opening of the very first clinic in all of Canada dedicated to treating people with this condition. And then I became one of the first patients. And so now we finally have a place, a home for us to kind of manage everything that's going on. And so that brings us to this pandemic, where I'm horribly vulnerable to COVID-19, because just think about how swine flu, which is far less severe than COVID, completely destroyed my life in many ways. So COVID, and I was quite healthy at the time. I didn't have any sleeping problems. I was pretty normal. And now I have terrible sleeping problems as I had to work out with our amazing professors. I'm awake 36 hours every single day because of my pain. And the amount of sleeping pills I take to try to counteract that, I take 20 sleeping pills every night. And my doctors say this is unprecedented. They've never seen someone on so many sedatives. and I'm still awake that long. So I'd be awake like 45 hours without sedatives. None of my doctors have ever seen anything like it. So they call me a medical marvel. And so it's a great distinction to have, sure. But so that brings us to now. So the March lockdown, as mentioned, I had to drop out, and that's because they shut down everything. I couldn't have access to my pain treatments anymore. And my two main pain treatments are ketamine infusions, which is when you go to a hospital and they pump you full of ketamine through an IV, and that kind of resets your overcharged neurological system. And so I couldn't get that. And then I couldn't get my weekly therapeutic deep tissue massages, which are super important because since my joints are so unstable, my muscles tighten up to compensate. And we're trying to walk and exist on super tight muscles on top of everything else is incredibly painful. So my pain went from 8 out of 10 all the time to 9 out of 10 all the time. And it was just unbearable. I instead of taking half a methadone pill painkiller a day, I was taking over 4 a day. And that still wasn't managing my pain. So I had to drop out, not for the first time. And it was just so frustrating. And so imagine knowing that your situation is temporary and still having suicidal thoughts because you just can't handle it. So it makes no sense. And this is the kind of thing that I mainly wanted to talk about, is because these lockdowns, I'm not anti-lockdown, as I'll explain, but these lockdowns are meant to protect vulnerable people, of which I am one of. And you're going so far as to make someone who's vulnerable suicidal. It doesn't make sense. So thankfully, the government kind of figured out what they were doing a little bit more. And now in the lockdown that is happening currently, they consider both my treatments essential and I can get them. And that's why I'm doing far better now. And I was able to take 3 courses at a time this semester, which would have been impossible before. In March, I was taking 0. Now it's 3. I'd say that's quite the improvement. And so things are tricky, and it's inevitable for another pandemic to happen. And I just hope that lessons are learned by everyone, including our governments, to be able to better help people who need helping. And what's been great about the pandemic in terms of university is the online classes are amazing, because for me personally, when you have no control over when you're actually awake and you sleep through entire days, how are you supposed to attend a specific timing lecture every single time? It's impossible. And so having online classes where you can attend a seminar on a certain given day is really, really great. And all my courses will probably be online for quite a while. I'm now 2 years away from graduating, slow and steady. And so that's basically one of the main lessons, I think. And also group projects, I think we need to be cognizant about those, because when you choose a day to work with someone, let's say, let's meet on Tuesday, and then you have a terrible sleep because you have a pain spike, you feel like you're letting your group down. So I think when we do have group projects, there should be alternatives, and not necessarily just the alternative of doing it by yourself instead, because in some cases that's double the work. So more of like an alternative type of project you can do. And that's something that's really great about this course, is they give plenty of alternatives. You can do creative projects to show that you have knowledge of what we're talking about, but also can show your creative side and show that you've done some research, but also that you've really thought about it and can talk about it in multiple kind of directions. And as mentioned before I wrap it up, there was a documentary that was recently completed that talks about my story. And if you do want to follow that story, I will put in the chat after it moves on from me a link to an Instagram page where you can follow everything going on when it's publicly released next year. And also a little cool fact is, if you are planning on taking Professor Ben Cook's sociology class, you will see me as part of the curriculum. My story is going to be in a case study. So I encourage you to take those classes because they're great. So thank you very much to our professors for giving me this opportunity to share my experiences throughout not one, but now 2 pandemics. And hopefully we can all work together to help those who need helping. And one of the recommendations I give for that is one, get vaccinated if you can. That helps not just you, it helps people like me. And two, reach out to people who especially are vulnerable and super isolated. If you feel isolated, imagine how people who can't even talk to their siblings in person because it's just too dangerous for them. So reach out on social media or give them a call, and it means the world to them. And hopefully as more of us get vaccinated, all these will become more physical. So thanks again, and it's a great opportunity I was given here, so thanks.
Thank you so much, Mitch. And as I said before, I think in email to you, I've learned so much from you this semester, and I'm really glad that we had the chance for others to hear you, because I find it so helpful for me as an instructor to hear this in many ways. So thank you so much. Ryan, I think.
Yeah, well, first let me thank
our final two guests.
The three presenters so far. As you know, we left this final panel, the topic to be determined, and I think we just felt that with all of the experience over the last academic year in the course, and generally, that we wanted to think about some of these points and kind of conclude this experience by thinking about lessons learned, things we still need to learn, and to also reflect on some of the good things that have happened during the course of the pandemic, and things that we want to make sure we don't go back to that weren't good for everyone. So I really appreciate the perspectives that everyone so far has shared. It's a little bit, I think, different topic moving to the next two speakers, and it's to talk a little bit, I think, about the experience of inclusive opportunities or accessible opportunities under these conditions. So one of the things about this course that I think most people are familiar with is we've been really pleased and fortunate to have with us a number of alumni who have also been essentially registered in the course and tuning in. And one of the things that we often think is really cool about this course and this format is that we have alumni from across the country and around the world who have been able to join us. That isn't something that would have been possible under a normal academic year where we would be doing perhaps a course on campus. So that's been a really valuable thing. And one of the people that you'll all know, if you've been in the course this semester, Leslie C., Leslie Chisholm, who's often commenting and is one of our international alumni who has been joining us, and we're very pleased to have him. We said, well, when we're talking about sort of reflecting back on this semester, on this course, on the whole pandemic, and we want to try and highlight some of the things that have worked well. What if we ask Leslie to kind of talk a little bit about her experience, joining in to this course and connecting with others in the course from the other side of the world. So let me give you the formal introduction, but that's the context for this next presentation. So Leslie Chisholm is an alumna who, as you know, has been joining us, and she's living in Australia. She graduated with a BSc and MSc in marine biology from Guelph in 1985 and 1988, respectively. Now, I'm guessing you gave us this information, so I'm okay to list years. From 1989 to 1994, she was a research assistant in the Department of Zoology, which is the former department of which I'm now chair, working on flatworm parasites of fish. She then moved to Australia and did her PhD at the University of Queensland on taxonomy and biology of flatworm parasites of sharks and rays on the Great Barrier Reef. Boy, you could have picked a slightly less amazing place to go. Sorry, I'm just jealous. And most of her research was carried out at the UQ Huron Island Research Station on the Great Barrier Reef. And presently, she's the Senior Collection Manager of the Australian Helminthological Collection at the South Australian Museum. For those of you not in biology, helminthological is a fancy word for parasitic worms or flatworms. And in her spare time, she enjoys gardening, sailing, and Bollywood dancing. I don't know if we're going to see that tonight, but we just wanted to bring you in and get your thoughts, because we see you in the chat, and we just think it's so amazing to have you here joining us from Australia. So great to have you here tonight, Leslie.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm really thrilled to be here and yeah, excited. It's really odd being on the side of the camera. I've actually had to wear something nice and brush my hair, so it's a bit strange. I'll just share my screen. So I just wanted to start by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you today on the land of the Kaurna people who live on the Adelaide Plains. And I was really enlightened and moved by Carla's presentation last week when she sort of spoke of the underlying reason why we do acknowledgement of country. So I thought I would just let you read the English words, but I'm also going to play a Kaurna person saying the acknowledgement of country, so you can listen to that. Ngalo tampan de yala ka ngalo kana yatanga in barendi. Ngalo tampan de panako to la yatanga. Kana men yait yata matanya wa matandanya ko. Panako yalcha, panako tapa porna. Kana men ito yalcha porna. Yata kuma por matandi, or wariapendi, or tanka matalaindi. Kuma kumatani yait men ngalo tampandi, yanga yalaka. Panakoyata, kumatanayata, kandipat tuara, kumawarnanku. Sorry. So as you heard, I'm currently living in Adelaide, where I work at the South Australian Museum. And most people have no idea where Adelaide is. Everybody knows where Sydney is. Some might know where Melbourne is. But this is me down here in Adelaide, and it's in the state of South Australia. Just a bit of perspective, South Australia is about the same land area as Ontario, but we only have a population of about 1.7 million people. So it's not very populated. And it's about 16,500 kilometers away from Guelph. So you couldn't get a whole lot further. So when I saw the email that came around from the alumni saying that this course was on offer and saw the timing of it, which was sort of 7 o'clock to 8:50 at night, it was fantastic. Usually anything happening in North America for me is in the middle of the night. But this time, your evening, which might not be so convenient for you, was perfect for me. It was about 10:30 in the morning or till 12:30. So it was wonderful because I was able to actually attend live, which I really like because one of the things is being able to interact. It's one thing to look at the video afterwards, but having the opportunity to interact, I think, is really important. The other thing I really liked was the alumni office was really on it. They sent a reminder the day before that the course was on the next day. And that was great, I remember. But also being the day before, I don't know what everybody else's email inbox is like, but mine's an absolute disaster. So it meant I didn't have to scroll down, way down to try to find the link. It was right there. It was easy to do. Zoom, I found super easy to use. I really enjoyed it. I didn't have any problems with connections, and it was great. I spent the last couple of days trying to figure out how to share my screen and do various other things, and that was really easy to learn as well. I had a husband who was on the other end of the Zoom chat. And the chat function was great. It's just easy to ask questions. If I had anything that I wasn't sure about, it was just easy to put something down, make comments on what I was hearing. There weren't many barriers at all. Really, probably the only thing, it was just a little glitch, was the time change that happened. Ontario went on to daylight savings, and so I sort of tuned in the week after daylight savings had started, and I realized I was an hour late. So I adjusted my time. It would start at 9:30. Well, this weekend we went off daylight savings, so this now started at 8:30 for me. So, but really minor thing. Other things, maybe some of the speakers would use acronyms or other terms that I'm not familiar with because I'm not there. And again, it was just a really quick little note asking what that meant. And Ryan, who was usually on it in 2 seconds, just giving me the answer. Sorry, it was super easy. One thing I've been thinking about as I've been listening to the talks as well is that it would have been really nice, I think, to have a chat platform for alumni. So I would go away from the the talks, sort of thinking, wow, I'd really like to talk more about this with other people who'd heard the seminars. So perhaps going forward, something, I don't know how hard that is to set up. It may be difficult, but going forward, that might be something to think about, because I think other alumni might appreciate that as well. Also, just chatting to other alumni would be great. So online versus in-class learning. Obviously, I'm not able to attend if it's in class. I sort of pulled this picture off the web and thought it was really funny when I really looked at it. Nobody in the front row. So nothing has changed. But I was really wondering what Zoom classes would be like. I'd attended a few online conferences, and a lot of times you'd find that you just didn't make a connection. So I sort of thought, what will a class be like? And I was just amazed at what happened. I think we're all operating at a really heightened and intense state at the moment. And what Sophie and Ryan fostered was just an incredibly safe environment. And we've heard it here tonight with the stories of Caitlin and Mitch. These are very personal stories. And people have opened up in ways throughout the course that I'm just amazed with. And they all touched me deeply, and they've changed me. And I don't know if I would have gotten that perspective if I was sitting in a class of 600 people. I found looking at people's facial expressions as they were speaking on screen, I could feel the intensity, and it was amazing. And again, if I was sitting in the back row of a lecture theater, I don't know that I would have captured that. So that's my feeling anyway. And Caitlin and Mitch have sort of remarked about that as well. So yeah, and I think too, it would also provoke me to speak with my friends afterwards and say, this is the kind of thing I heard. And probably the presentation that had the most effect on me was Queen, when she was speaking about Black Lives Matter. And I was just really shocked and appalled that the racism that she'd experienced, especially as a child. And as Ryan said, I do Bollywood dancing, and the majority of my friends are Indian. And I've been the sort of person that I've never seen a person and thought they're this color. And I never really thought about the fact that most of my friends are Black. And it was really, you know, and when Queen spoke, I just thought, I wonder if my friends have experienced this. And so I went to one of them. I just said, look, you know, how is it for you when you moved to Australia? What did you experience? And it was quite horrifying and terrible, the stories she told me. And I just didn't expect that she'd experienced that. And I don't think I would have had that conversation with her if I hadn't gone to this course and heard that story and sort of taken it and thought, well, how does it affect me, or how does it affect my friends? So I now have even a closer relationship with my friend and have a better understanding. So it was because of this course. Now, when I was talking to Sophie, when she asked me if I was interested in doing this, she also wanted maybe for me to look at some of the similarities and the differences between the two countries. So I've just done this quickly. And probably the most similar thing that came through in the conversations we had throughout the semester was things that really need to be done within the countries. It's really been exacerbated by COVID. So we need to be self-sufficient. So when supply chains break down, we can still function as a country. And both Australia and Canada recognize that we have not dealt with the issues of aged and community care, mental health awareness, and Black Lives Matters awareness well at all. And that these are all things that need to be concentrated on going forward. And luckily our government has said these are all issues and have said that they will put some money into the budget for them. We'll see what happens when the budget's released, but that is promising that at least the conversations are happening. The big difference, this was the course. most of the talks we heard were funded by the Catalyst Fund, which I guess most of you know, but it's a University of Guelph initiative to fund projects that are specifically on an aspect of COVID-19. And so that can be a seeding project that then is funded by, you have a small project and then you can get funding from a bigger organization later once you've done the first seeding project, or just one specific project. There was no such initiative at the University of Adelaide. Nothing at all. And the problem at the University of Adelaide, or universities in general in Australia, is their funding is really, really requires international student enrollments. So they're very dependent on the money they get from international students. We're very close to Asia, so we have a large population of international students. I did a bit of a search, I'm not sure if that number is right, but I found that University of Guelph has on average about 1,400 international students. And before COVID hit this year, there were 9,000 international students who were due to enroll at the University of Adelaide. The university year starts in March here, so a lot of the students didn't even come because of our shutdown. And the really unfortunate thing is because of this, there's just no money. And there's been massive staff cuts at the university and many universities across Australia. At the University of Adelaide, there's 400 jobs that they're going to probably have to cut. At the moment, they're looking for staff to take a 3.5% pay cut, which has been supported by the majority of staff, but that's now gone to Senate, and whether that will go through or not, I don't know. But it is really tough times at the university here. Oops, wrong way. Go down. The next thing that really became evident throughout the conversations that we had in this course was how the government approached their lockdowns and other responses to COVID. And in Australia, it was all about science. It was the premiers and the Prime Minister took on board what the scientists were saying and what the recommendations of the chief medical officers in their province or states were recommending. And they stuck with it. And they've stuck with it the whole time. So when it comes down to lockdowns and that sort of thing, it might not be politically favorable to have the lockdown, but they do it. Just this past week, there was a small outbreak in Brisbane. It was 5 people. It was the first community transmissions in a very long time. It was before Easter. Everything had now opened up. Everybody had the travel plans sorted. They locked it down. And, you know, very happy, unhappy people who planned to see family for the first times, but they locked it down and they've shut down and they've opened up again. It was a really quick one. It's a 3-day lockdown. And it sort of isolated those that needed to be isolated, and it did its trick. So that's been really good. And our vaccine rollout response, again, it's based on medical science and how it's being done. But I guess 2 weeks ago, we learned that in the course that there will be the 2 doses of vaccine, but they're not taking the recommended spacing time. So for the Pfizer vaccine, it's supposed to be about 21 days, but in Canada, it's going to be 4 months that you get your second shot. Now, I understand it's sort of a triage type thing. Let's try to vaccinate as many people, give as many people 1 shot. But as Sarah said, it's really questionable what they're doing because it might be that nobody's getting the coverage they need. And I find that quite worrisome. Australia's like Canada, we don't have enough vaccine. Our rollout has been extremely slow, but we don't have the infection rates that you have in Canada. So it's not as much of a panic. But even if it was, I don't know that I think we would still stay with the science. In my opinion, the vulnerable people really do need those 2 shots in the time allotted. So that's another difference. And that was, you read things in the news, but it was really nice to hear in the course because you know it's real information. So just to sort of summarize, how I benefited from this course, it really broadened my understanding of a diversity of COVID issues that I had no idea about some of the topics that we talked about. And you sort of read that little outline that comes the week before about what we'll be talking about next week. You think, how on earth are you going to pull this all together and have it? And it was always just amazing. And I was always thrilled at the end of it, of the super things I'd learned, and very thought-provoking, and had me, just really thinking about things differently. I really liked it. The other thing was just, I've always known this, but University of Guelph was an outstanding center for research and learning. And it always has been. And the work that's being done there that we heard about all through this semester was just incredible. Really something. And the other thing was just the enthusiasm that was in this course from the organizers, panelists, students, and alumni. You guys are doing it really tough over there, and you've been in lockdown so long. The challenges have been massive. And every week there's a smile on everybody's face, and they're inspired, and they're thinking, and they're enjoying, and it was incredible to see, really incredible. And just the connection. I really enjoyed just connecting with Guelph again. I mean, I started there, Ryan's already in 1981, so that's almost 40 years ago. And the enthusiasm and fun and the inspiration of the lecturers then is just the same as it is now in such difficult times. And it's wonderful to see. And from a side of personal growth, I am scared to death of giving presentations. So when Sophie contacted me, my first was, no, I'm sorry, I can't do it. You know, and I just held on to that email for a while. And I thought about it, and I thought, there are so many challenges that everybody here has faced and met head on. And I thought, this is my challenge. I should try to do this presentation. And so that's about it. And I just want to thank you again for a fantastic semester. And really hope with this next lockdown that your families and all of you are safe and well. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It's been, it's always kind of interesting, I think, for Sophie and me when we see comments like, thank you so much for including the alumni. And we're like, no, thank you for coming. This has been so cool, to have this. I like this.
I know it wouldn't have been possible without it being that time slot to do it live. So I don't know if that was unusual. I
think we just had, because this was sort of extra for us. This we had to do it outside of normal time. Plus, I think we wanted it to be more flexible for people that didn't overlap with other stuff they were doing in other courses. And because we have students in so many different programs across all 4 years, it would have been probably impossible to find a slot that was free for everybody. So it kind of worked out that way, but it's been really advantageous. We didn't know we were going to have an Australian contingent in the course, I have to say. So that was a very nice bonus that happened to be made possible. Yes, and to catch all the speakers too. So they're all, and then you raised a good point, which is there's an email that goes out. Beth always writes a really nice email afterwards, and I usually say, I agree, and it's always like, thank you for sharing your time and expertise, and because they're volunteering their evening and everything as well, right? So yeah, I agree with you. It's been really interesting. So I'm super glad we invited you. If you hadn't said something about nervousness about presentations, nobody would have known that. But no, that was great. And we've always seen you in the chat, and we thought, you know what, this would be cool to kind of get a perspective of somebody who's been able to join us from far because of the format we've been in some ways forced to use, which is the online format. So one of the things that's kind of been fun is that there's all these sort of little small world connections and so on. So our next speaker, there's a segue here, is Sherry Hinks. And it turns out Sherry and Leslie were in school together. Is that not correct? All right, so here you go. So I think we talked, it might have been last semester, about Malcolm and his childhood friend both ended up in this course. And so here we have another unintended but very interesting connection. So our last speaker, I'm very happy to introduce Sherry from my department. She's been a lab instructor and coordinator at the University of Guelph for, am I allowed to say, Sherry? She's got a very fancy pin that says 25. I'm not going to give any more information than that. And she's taught all kinds of different courses: humans in the natural world, courses in cell and invertebrate biology, limnology, natural history, and has been active in our field courses. So she's well known and very well loved by the students in the department, and has been for a number of years. She has a BSc in marine biology with a minor in philosophy and an MSc in ecology of aquatic invasive species from University of Guelph. So she's also an alumna. She describes herself overall as a biology nerd who likes to hike and rummage through all sorts of places to find cool things. And she's also a Scotch drinker. And I will just let you know that I found out, and Sherry found out today, that she was named the recipient of the College of Biological Science Staff Teaching Excellence Award. So congratulations, Sherry. And in the nomination that went in, it mentioned a lot of the innovative work that Sherry did as one of our very dedicated teaching staff members in the department to take advantage of and maintain our commitment to hands-on learning, experiential learning, and keeping students engaged, which I think is what we're going to hear a bit about. So super proud that Sherry took home that award on behalf of the department. And we're super glad to have you here tonight, Sherry.
All right, well, thank you, Ryan. Thanks for the introduction. And Leslie was actually my TA in one of the courses that I'm going to talk about today. So that's
there we go. Okay.
The invertebrate biology class. So when that one comes up again, Leslie was sort of inspirational in my path down that as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Does that look okay? All right, so thank you for inviting me tonight, and I'm really excited to be part of the panel, and I'd like to say thanks to Caitlin and Mitch both for sharing their stories. Those are tough stories sometimes to tell, and you've given me lots to think about as an instructor, thinking about accessibility and what we can do to support student learning. So tonight, as Ryan mentioned, I'm going to talk to you about why we put some of these field kits together, an overview of each of the courses, what was in the kits for each of the courses, some of the challenges, what the students said, and some of our lessons learned. So both of the courses are typically very hands-on. One is a fourth-year course and the other is a second-year course. They range in size from about 60 to 200 students. They both have a 3-hour lecture and a 3-hour lab a week. In the limnology course, which is the study of freshwater, we typically take the students on 4 field trips, and they learn how to sample lakes and rivers and learn how to assess water quality. And then in the second-year course, the invertebrate course, we look at all of the animals without backbones, so everything from small single-celled organisms to larger sort of charismatic creatures like octopus and sea stars. And because both courses are very hands-on, our biggest question as we started to plan for last fall as well as this winter was, how on earth are we going to meet some of the learning objectives where we typically, do lots of things with the students, we take them out places. So at the beginning, we thought about what was important to us, and a bunch of things arose. And first of all, how to meet the course learning objectives. We wanted them to be fun. We wanted them to be engaging. We wanted to promote the love of learning. And most of all, we wanted the students away from the screen doing things. We know that that's good for their mental health, and with lots of Zoom fatigue going on, we really wanted them out there doing things. We wanted them to have relevant real life experiences and sort of not busy work. We wanted to include everything that they might need. And that was important to us too, especially in some of the lockdown situations we've been facing. We didn't want students to have to go out and buy, little bits and pieces of things that they might need or they might not have on hand. And safety was a big concern. One of the courses, the limnology course, we send the students out to water. And I typically take them out in the field, and I know how sometimes they behave around the water. So I was kind of worried on the weeks that we sent them out to do this on their own. They were given lists of safety instructions and had to watch safety videos and all sorts of fun things. We wanted options. So what if they didn't get a kit? We ran into some issues with international shipping. In one of the courses, we simply couldn't ship them because there was some food in them as well as some preserved organisms. So they didn't allow us to ship them. Or what if it wasn't safe for them to participate in going out to the stream? Or what if they didn't have safe access or weren't able to, for whatever reason, to get outside? So we wanted things to be accessible in terms of cost, in terms of safety, some of the differing abilities and experiences that the students have had. We also considered mental health. It was a big concern as the pandemic continued, so it wasn't directly related to the kits. It certainly was a consideration throughout both semesters. So we had frequent check-ins with the students, and you can see on the bottom picture there, it says on a Riggs scale, how are you feeling today? And Riggs is my dog, and he makes frequent appearances through the semester. There were a couple weeks where we just got the sense that the students were overwhelmed with things. So typically we would have a quiz each week. And there were a couple weeks where we simply said, you know what, no quiz this week. Let's take care of ourselves. Snap a picture of yourself doing something that you enjoy doing, or let us know what you're doing, and we're going to count that instead of one of our quiz marks. And they always had choice in the activities that they were going to do. And often, you know, we had 7 assignments and we counted the top 5 or whatever, just to give them a break as the semester went on. So I'm going to talk about each of the courses separately, just to give you a sense of what we did in each one of them. So in the 4th year limnology class, we typically have about 60 students. It's a required course for our marine biology students. And as I mentioned, we take the students out typically on 4 field trips to local streams and rivers. We collect samples and we collect the bugs that live there, and we try and assess the water quality. In lab, we also conduct a toxicity test to examine the effects of some kind of chemical on aquatic organisms. And we've used various pharmaceuticals over the past years. We use things like acetaminophen, ibuprofen to see what the impacts are going to be. So you can see the challenge that we faced in offering this course remotely. We simply couldn't take the students out to sampling locations. We weren't going to see them face to face. And we thought, well, we could simply video the sampling techniques and supply the students with data for analysis. But what we really wanted them to do was get outside and do something. So we came up with 2 activities we thought they could do remotely that would promote some hands-on learning. The first was a toxicity test, and so we sent them various organisms and we sent them some salt solution. And then we thought, okay, now we've got that one covered, let's have them participate in a citizen science project. So we participated in a citizen science project called the Leaf Pack Network. And that way they were able to sample the water and the organisms that live there and assess their own local habitats. Both of these activities have well-established sampling protocols, and the students are actively engaged in data collection and contributing to scientific databases. So what's included in the kits? The kits, first of all, they cost us about $25 to put together, and they were provided free of charge to the students. So the department covered the cost of those. And we included things like a welcome card, some safety instructions, a safety whistle in case they got out into the water and needed some help. For the toxicity study, we sent them jars of live Daphnia, which are small water organisms, and I'll show you a picture of those in a minute. And we sent them some control as well as some salt water. For the leaf packs, it was a little bit longer a list, simply because it had more pieces to it, because they had to make bags of leaves, they had to put them in the streams, they collected water samples, they analyzed water chemistry, and then they needed stuff to be able to sort through and identify the organisms that they found. There were tags included for the leaf bags that had University of Guelph research in progress. And we had done this because I had gone out and I put a couple bags in the water and they went missing. And so we thought, well, if we put research in progress, maybe people would leave them alone. They had my contact information on them, which also allowed general public to see what was going on. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, we had a couple of people that were walking along the Speed River at various points during the 3 weeks that they were out, and they called me and they said, hey, we want to know what's going on, because it says if you have any questions or comments or anything, let us know. So they in fact did call. So that was kind of fun to see. We also provided sorted samples to the students in case their bags went missing or they didn't have safe access to a stream. So while they wouldn't be able to go out and do the actual water chemistry sampling, they could go outside and test it in their backyard. They could test it in their water at home, whatever they wanted. But we also gave them the invertebrates so that they could have a look at those and decide what the water quality was of 2 of the local streams in town. So together, actually, I think I skipped a slide. So for the toxicity studies, we wanted them to understand how scientists assess the impacts of toxic substances. We sent the students live Daphnia, which you can see pictured there on the right. And we also sent them salt solutions. We use salt since it's used in the winter to de-ice the roads, but we also know that it can have serious impacts on aquatic habitats. And it's also way easier to send salt through the mail than it is to send various other chemicals, including things like ibuprofen. Lots of paperwork involved there. No paperwork involved for sending salt solutions. So together during an asynchronous lab, we set up the study together. They added the water, in this case with salt. They monitored the Daphnia to see what they did over 48 hours. And then we collected a class set of data so they could calculate how toxic the salt was. And they wrote a report based on those numbers. And the images pictured on the right are the ones that students sent to us of their setups, which was kind of fun to see how they did. Once the studies were over, the students kept their Daphnia, and last I heard, some of the students actually still have their Daphnia left over from, we did that study in October, and some of them still have kept their colonies going. So they've made great little desk pets for them during the pandemic. The next activity they did was this leaf pack, and it took place over about 3 to 4 weeks. And the Leaf Pack Network is an international network of teachers, students, and citizens that investigate their local streams. And it's facilitated by the Stroud Water Center out of Pennsylvania. So we connected with them. They came and gave a guest lecture, and they got the students really, really excited about being able to participate in this and contributing to a bigger database. It uses tree leaves and aquatic insects to determine the health of streams. And so again, the students were sent everything they needed. They filled their bags with leaves. They went to a stream. They collected water samples. They measured water chemistry. They did some habitat assessment. They put tags in their bags, left them in the water for 3 weeks to see what colonized them. And this was a really, really stressful week for me, knowing that I had sent them out into the water to put things in the water. And of course, we had prepared them for the safety. They had watched the videos, and we had read them sort of the riot act about, you know, making sure that they didn't go over the top of their boots and things like that. They had my cell number in case they needed it. They took somebody from their bubble with them, moms, dads, siblings, roommates, and we later heard some really funny stories about their experience in the field. One dad fell in the water and then sort of got drifted a little bit downstream, but laughed the entire way. And a couple of the siblings now were sort of inspired to come to Guelph and learn things too. So they were really excited about having the opportunity to do those things and share them with their families and their friends. After 3 weeks, they went back out to the stream. They pulled their bags in. Some of the bags became dislodged, but in the end, we only lost 2 completely. They sorted through these leaf packs and they found the animals that colonized them. So pictured there at the top is one of our mayflies. They identified all of the bugs, and the bugs tell us a story about how healthy the watershed is. Some are really pollution tolerant, some are not so. And so depending on what they found, it indicated the overall health of their ecosystem. So this was kind of fun for them because often they will have walked by a local stream and had no idea what was in there, so they could get out there and have a look. After they had collected and analyzed the data, they could upload it to both the Leaf Pack Network, which is pictured on the right. And we also worked with developers from OpenEd, and they built us a map that was more specific to our course, so it had a lot more variables in it, so they could compare data with each other too. So you can sort of see the cluster of students lots of students in Southwestern Ontario. So out of the 60 students that we had, 2 of them were international, yeah, 2 of them were in the US. So we actually managed to send the kits across the border for that as well. And here's what they had to say about that course. They loved the field kits. It was genius. They appreciated being getting out there and doing things. And because they got to keep everything, some of them were really excited about having, you know, the thermometers left behind and some of the water chemistry test strips and things like that. So they seemed to really, really enjoy doing it. And then because that was successful, we thought, well, that went pretty well, so let's do it again for another course, this time for the winter semester. This time it was for a second-year invertebrate morphology and evolution course. This course typically has between 150 and 200 students, again, a 3-hour lecture and a 3-hour lab a week, and it examines the diversity of the invertebrates, about 98% of all organisms on Earth. It's a course that many students are reluctant to take, but it is a required course for most of our majors. And after seeing and touching and manipulating the invertebrates in the lab, many of them really enjoy the course and they pursue related courses and continue with grad opportunities and or work-related fields. So we provided them with activity kits that allowed them to participate in various hands-on activities. Oh, so you can see some of our organisms there that they usually would have got to have touched and held and done fun things with. Our hissing cockroaches, our leeches up there at the top, and our snails. We've got some African land snails in the lab too. So these are usually things that they would have been able to interact with. So here's a picture of what was included in the kits. It contained the necessary equipment to do limited invertebrate field research. And again, it was important to us to consider safety, to consider accessibility, to provide everything that they needed so they wouldn't have to go out and get other things. We had 190 students and we had about 10 that didn't receive the kits. They were either international or they didn't buy the kits. The kits were about $40 to put together and we cost shared that with the students. So the department paid $20 and the students paid $20 to get those kits. So the first activity we did with them was we decided to explore food security. We talked a lot about the importance of invertebrates to them in their lives. So it's been estimated that meat demand is expected to increase globally by 76% over about the next 40 years. And at that rate, it's simply not sustainable. And we do know that over 2 billion people around the world eat insects as part of their traditional diet. So we thought it would be great to introduce the students as well as us to insects as protein source. So in the kits, we sent them some cricket powder from Entimo Farms, which is the largest cricket producers in North America, and they're just outside of Peterborough. So just after spring break, we hosted a virtual Great Cricket Bake-Off. So they were told they could make anything that they wanted using this cricket powder. And we had various prize categories for the food. They could make pet food if they didn't want to make people food. If they didn't want to make something with cricket powder, they could make something with another invertebrate, or if they didn't want to do either, there was an alternate assignment provided. And the sort of premise for the assignment was that we were opening a new invertebrate themed restaurant. So they could write a press release about the new restaurant that we were opening and why you should, or maybe if they felt strongly, they could write about why we shouldn't open an invertebrate themed restaurant. So they baked, they plated, and they blew us away with their creativity. And pictured there are some of their creations, cricket crunch cake, and up at the top, I don't know if you can see that very well, but they actually made little chocolate crickets. One of the students was so inspired, she put together a 3-course meal using cricket powder. Somebody made falafels. Somebody made a rabbit tartare with a cricket powder meringue, and that was actually for their cat. That was part of our pet food category. And we are in the process of putting together a cookbook for that using a company that designs cookbooks. For me, this was probably one of the funnest activities they had, and definitely one that we will keep post-pandemic. Perhaps we will host it somewhere public so that we can actually try some of these things. Oh, next up, we wanted to continue with an experiment we've started a few years ago in this class, looking at the face mites that live on our face. We all have face mites. They crawl on your skin. They eat the dead skin cells. And so we sent the students the tools they needed to do this at home. Usually we would have them scan their own face strips and look for these mites, but because they didn't have microscopes, they sent their nasal strips back to us and we scanned them for us. So it's a pretty simple setup. The students sleep with a nasal strip on their face. When the mites are active, the next day they pack them up and they send them back to us. We had sent them pre-addressed in stamped envelopes. And I am sure our mail person wondered why I was getting so much mail. One day I received 110 envelopes in the mail, all pre-addressed. And some of the students had drawn pictures of face mites and wrote funny notes on the outside. So I'm sure that they certainly were wondering what was going on. We scanned the strips and we uploaded photos of their mites if we found them, and then we sent the samples off for barcoding and sequencing so we could look at mite lineages, part of a sort of long database that we're putting together. So another one of the activities that we did was to grow triops. And if you've ever grown sea monkeys, they are related to the sea monkeys. Fully grown, they're about 5 centimeters. You can see one pictured there in the top. That's one of the students sent that video in. So again, we sent them everything. They come as eggs, you add water to them, and miraculously these things grow out of the dust, supposedly. So the students had to sketch them, they had to observe them. We told them to sit quietly for 10 minutes a day and simply observe these organisms, make some notes about what the organisms are doing, take some sketches, and just sort of reflect on what the animals are doing and how they're doing it, why they're doing it. This activity garnered a lot of excitement. Pictures and videos are still being uploaded to the course website, and some students were definitely better triops parents than others as they forgot to add water and they dried out. Along the way, at various points in the semester, students made these paper models. This was our solution to some of the live dissections. The models are put together by a company out of the States, and they send you these pictures, and then you can color them, you can cut them out, you glue them together, and they are all remarkably anatomically correct. And so the students appreciated this activity just in terms of learning how organisms are put together, but also that it was a nice stress break to color and construct things. So I think we sent them 7 of them, and they had to do 5 through this semester. And finally, they dissected a sea star with us. We sent them all of the dissecting tools they need. We sent them scissors and probes and gloves and preserved sea star. And we did the demonstration with them live. And so as we were doing cuts along the edges of the sea star, they were doing it along with us. In terms of prep, it was probably the most challenging. The sea stars were expensive to buy prepackaged. They were about $12 a piece. But we decided that we could buy them in a pail for $1 a piece. And then we bought a vacuum sealer, and we paid one of our grad students to sit and vacuum seal 200 of these things in order to get them mailed out. We just did this activity last week, and today we surveyed the students about their favorite activities in the course. And as far as favorite activities go, this was definitely it. They really enjoyed the opportunity to be able to dissect something. So some of our lessons learned: it takes twice as long to do anything, from sourcing to packing to buying to mailing to teaching. It all takes a long time. And cats drink water, they knock over cups, they're curious about everything. So everything had to be cat proof. I don't own a cat, or haven't owned a cat for a long time. So I had sort of forgotten that they have this tendency. So when the students were doing the Daphnia, the cats had knocked them off. They drank the triops, and I got a couple panicked emails about, oh my gosh, my cat just ate my triops. Are they going to be okay? And in fact, yes, they are. And students are amazing. Despite all of the challenges that they were facing through this pandemic, they were so incredibly resilient, patient, and enthusiastic. And so that was definitely appreciated by all of us as well. And the other big lesson learned was it takes a village to do all of this. From the top, you'll recognize Dr. Gregory there, the boss, and he was an incredibly supportive, enthusiastic adopter of new and innovative ways to teach. He said yes to all the crazy ideas and figured out ways to fund them. Dr. Smith and Dr. Ackerman were the professors involved in the course. We had an amazing gaggle of TAs, an amazing gaggle of volunteers. We had guest speakers. We had about 20 guest speakers from across various places, all previous students. And so they were really inspirational to the students. An incredibly supportive family who put up with sampling kits all over the house, especially when we were in lockdown, helping sort things out. People that helped pack the materials, the mailroom people who helped mail the kits. We delivered some of the kits by hand. The co-ESP provided some financial support. The Biodiversity Institute barcoded everything. And the library bookstore, or the university bookstore, helped us source some of the materials and sold the kits for us the second time around. So thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. I said in the chat that I knew most of this, but I'm still blown away. when I see the summary. When we were thinking again about how can we kind of cap off the year in the pandemic, we wanted to talk about some of the challenges, lessons learned, and some of the really amazing things that that people at the university have done. And I guess that's a theme throughout the semester, because you've seen about research, you've seen about other different initiatives that people have undertaken, but in teaching as well. And the effort, like if you you look at what Sherry and team put in to try to make this as engaging and accessible and as memorable as possible during all of this, it's truly impressive. And those are the kinds of things that, when I think about moving into the post-pandemic academic environment, I don't want to lose the kinds of amazing things that you just saw and that we've been seeing all semester, nor do I want to go back to normal in many of the ways that were not good for many people. So I think that was just a perfect kind of conclusion to kind of capture just how amazing so much of this has been. And I want to certainly echo what a lot of people have said, which is there's the students, the staff, the faculty, SAS, across campus. We heard about the Catalyst Fund that the VP Research Office put together, Alumni Affairs connecting with the alumni, and just everybody kind of rising to that challenge and coming up with amazing things. And that's why when we designed the second semester, we sort of called it creativity and scholarship in a time of crisis. We'd gone so much from just let's figure out what's going on with this pandemic to already we can spend a whole semester talking about all the pretty impressive things that have happened at the university. So really glad. And I may have posted a link one time before, but we talked about assessments, and I learned some things. I worked with Colin on another course as well, and we experimented with different things in terms of take-home exam formats and stuff that I'm not going to go back to sit down. Barry's point about can you write this all down in an hour and a half? I'm much happier with some of the stuff that we've come up with. And I think having the necessity of experimenting with remote formats has led to these kinds of really, I think, impressive and inspiring kinds of innovations, more accessible, more flexible. And I couldn't help but notice a bunch of, all comments of can I go back and take that course again? And maybe that could be kind of open to alumni. Well, maybe it could. Maybe there could be some of these opportunities that, you get the kit and you get to go out and hopefully not fall in the water, but, plant the, well, of course, yeah. Well, the Citizen Science Project is really open. I mean, any of those are really meant to be accessible and participated in by communities, not just, science students in a university program. So absolutely, Patricia, I think you can probably get a bag full of leaves. In fact, we'll give you like an honorary leaf pack, just so you as a supporter of the course. So yes, I think there's a lot of those kinds of things that I would love to see us have moving forward. I am very cognizant of the time, and I realize that some people may need to go, but we did want to invite Malcolm Campbell, who's the Vice President Research, and as I mentioned, was responsible in large part, I'm sure there's a team there too, but for setting up the Catalyst Fund. And also when we were planning this second semester of the course, was directly involved with us, worked very closely with us to identify potential panelists and talk about themes. So pretty integral to what you saw this semester. So we're really happy to have Malcolm with us again tonight. I hand it to you, Malcolm, for a few words, and then we'll just kind of wrap up and wish everyone the best. Malcolm.
Well, thanks so much, Ryan. Is Beth with us as well this evening? I thought she was going to pop on.
Yeah, she's here as well.
Beth is here.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to give Beth an opportunity to say something, and then maybe I'll follow on.
Sure.
Beth.
Thanks so much. I won't really say very much. I wanted to thank all of the speakers for tonight. I thought I really appreciated hearing about your experiences. And I think it was a wonderful way to wrap up the semester. I thought this class, I know what people do on campus, but this class still blew my mind, right? The course as a whole, I was constantly amazed by the research that is happening on campus and the amazing directions that people have taken. And I really appreciated the way that our various panelists over the semester, including tonight, were really open about the struggles that they faced and the way they had to adapt to the pandemic context, and then showing all of the unique things that came out of that sort of adaptation. So that's really wonderful. So I think I'll hand it over to Malcolm at this point. But I really hope that you all enjoyed the course and as much as I did, or possibly more. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Beth. They say that it takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes courses like this to survive a pandemic. It's truly been a salve in a very difficult time. I note that on Facebook in the last 24 hours, Ryan actually enumerated what has occurred over the course of the last 2 semesters. 2 semesters, 24 panels, 70 faculty members from 29 departments from across all 7 colleges, 600 students, 300 alumni. Just an absolutely phenomenal outcome, an amazing, as I said, salve at a very difficult time for all of us globally, clearly. Tonight's panel really epitomized everything that it is that we've been doing at University of Guelph throughout the pandemic, grappling with very personal issues, figuring out ways institutionally to manage through them, whether it's by virtue of conducting research on the one hand, or delivering knowledge to people and putting it in people's hands to help them navigate tricky times. I think, as I said, tonight's panel really epitomized that. I will say, as both an alum and as a current member of the senior executive, I could not be more proud of the work, and I think institutionally cannot be more proud of the incredible work, first of all, done by our faculty members and their students. We've been supporting over 60 projects that are directed at the pandemic itself. That includes the sort of research that you saw literally in the sewers with Larry Goodridge doing testing on the one hand, but then all the way through, and in some ways it's moving from the bottom to the head. In some ways, I was thinking about Kim Martin's work documenting the incredible stories that children and youth are having throughout the pandemic. Just an incredible diversity of things that are helping us to navigate through these times, and really, really impressive. So kudos to our faculty and students who have been working together with them, but especially as we close this evening. I was most grateful to see the shout out, and I found it very touching within the chat this evening, and thank you very much for that. But frankly, none of this would have been realized in the sharing of what we've been able to support in terms of research and creativity had it not been for the amazing work of Ryan, of Sophie, of Beth, and Colin, and Karen. And I know I'm missing members of the team, of course, all our incredible TAs. But really, at the end of the day, it's our remarkable co-hosts, Sophie and Ryan, that made this happen. And I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of all of us, alumni, current students, and faculty members alike. Thank you so much, Sophie and Ryan, for putting the spotlight on our university and what it is that we do to help people. And I am going to go totally towards the platitude space here, and really does enable us to fulfill our ambition at University of Guelph to improve life. So thank you guys ever so much.
I think I can say it was our pleasure, and it's been kind of amazing to think back at. I think I told the story maybe at one point that we were at one of our chairs' lunches over, I believe, a beer or two, and there was, I think it was Serge Desmarais, the former administrator at the university, who's an honorary chair with us, and he said, if it were me, I would just do the whole semester on COVID. And I think we kind of went, maybe not the whole semester, but we could probably do a whole course. What would that look like? And that, it kind of came from that, and then just getting together and making happen, and not knowing how it would go over. Beth was such a mastermind in thinking of themes for the panels and contacting people. And surprisingly, I'm pretty sure almost everybody we asked said yes, right? I mean, that could have been that nobody, I don't have time, I'm burned out. Almost everyone, if not everyone, other than they couldn't make it that night or whatever, said yes. And so that was another example to us of what a community that you've got. You just heard basically 70 professors plus a number of students and others who all kind of contributed an evening and shared their expertise. And so it's been an amazing experience. And it's all been kind of an extra project, but really, I think, invigorating and inspiring that every week I kind of come out sort of wired, and Sophie and I will start messaging each other like, that was so good. I can't believe how good that was again, And so, but it also has a lot to do, and I said this to the TAs this morning in our meeting, that a big part of this too is the community feel, the open and safe environment for sharing experiences and for exploring from different perspectives where everybody's, different backgrounds and different thoughts are valued. And the TAs played a huge part of that in setting up the weekly seminars for students to be able to engage in that way. So another shout out to all of our TAs for their just amazing willingness to be flexible and to, roll with I'm going to go with the flow in this whole thing, and to create that environment for their individual seminar groups. Really important part of the course. And I just want to reflect, the last thing I'll say is just a few people mentioned that, over the course, one of the surprising things, it has been how much we've managed to have these personal connections. I'm almost not going to say in spite of the format. I would almost say because of, in some ways, of the format, that it isn't sitting at the very back. I teach in a 600-seater normally, and you're not seeing this. You don't have Coco-Leo barking. So there's a certain level where we've been able to interact that I've really valued. And that has meant students coming, sharing questions, sharing thoughts. Alumni being part of this has been really interesting and exciting for us too. So I want to thank everyone who's taken part in or helped to produce the course. Just been a really amazing experience for me as well. So that's my thank you to everyone who made this possible from the other side. It's made my Tuesday nights great too. So thank you very much, everyone. Sophie, did you want to say something?
So I really sorry to interrupt, but I can't. I think the chat is disabled for me, and I wasn't sure if people wanted me to post the documentary link.
Yes, they did. Yep. And if that doesn't work, we'll send it around by email as well.
Absolutely, Mitch. And I don't know if you can I because I've seen the documentary. I hope that's okay that I mentioned that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
So I've seen it and it's amazing. And I actually told Mitch that I was tired the night I started, and I thought I would just start for 5 minutes because I was so tired. And I just watched the whole thing. And
I remember
emailing him.
You sent me a thing. You're like, this is so good. We got
so it's an amazing documentary, and you should be really, I just so proud of, like, it's just on so many levels, that the storytelling, the way it's weaved together, it's perfect.
Makes me
so
so
yeah,
happy
I will
here.
say thank you so much. I loved it. I didn't know if you wanted me to say, because I know that you Nick, it's got to be private for a while, but when it's public, I highly recommend it to everybody. And thank you so much, Mitch and Caitlin, for accepting to come tonight and sharing your stories. And I will echo Sherry, you have really made me reflect a lot as an instructor, and Mitch had already done that this year in numerous ways. And thank you, Mitch and Leslie, to come on camera for us for the final evening, because it was so awesome. We wanted to have one student and one alum from the course to be with us at the end, and so thank you so much for agreeing to do that. Sherry, wow, you're awesome. I want to be in the cricket class. And Karen said that classes have changed since 1979, and AF said classes have changed since the 1990s. Classes have changed since 2019.
It's 2019.
Let's be honest, right? Yeah. I think it was so interesting to hear, and you, Barry, as well. Like I don't know where we're going, but we're going somewhere different than where we were before, and I hope we bring all the amazing things and all the things we've also learned about the challenges and all the ways in which we've become more open to inclusivity. And I love that, Barry, right? Inclusivity first, accommodation second. That's a good thing for me to think about a lot moving forward. And then thank you so much for the alumni and the students who joined us every week. And of course, thank you so much for the whole team, all our TAs and Colin, who has been amazing, and I have yet to meet in real life, in person, I guess I should say, because this is real life. But I'm looking forward to at some point. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. It's been really an amazing experience for me to participate in this. Yeah, I loved every evening of it, both fall and winter.
Well, again, thank you, everyone. I hope you are able to take some time and reflect and continue communicating with those that you've met through the course. Continue thinking about the value of multidisciplinary approaches and the idea of inclusion and hearing diverse perspectives. And again, just thank you so much for being here with us. I really appreciated it. All the best to everyone.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody, and take care of yourselves.
Good night.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Take care of yourselves. Bye.